Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. Tonight we are starting our fourth lesson in our digital lessons. I hope you've enjoyed following along so far, and after today, we're halfway done. So four down, four more to go. If you're just now joining us for the first time, that's perfectly okay. We're glad you're here, and you can get caught up by following the links below. So let's go ahead and jump into our fourth lesson. I want to begin with the question for you to ponder. You can write the question down if you want to, and we'll answer it over the course of this week's lesson. It's a strange question, it's a trick question. You'll know it's a trick question because the answer seems obvious, and we rarely ask such obvious questions. Are you ready? Is it possible to sin while doing something for God? Or is it possible to sin while giving something to God? The answer to both of those questions is yes, even though it seems counterintuitive. So tonight we will spend a lot of, or not tonight, but we will spend a lot of our lives trying to make God happy by what we have done for Him. I would imagine that sometimes He has been quite pleased with us, and other times, though, I think God might have been less impressed with what we were doing at the time and less impressed than other people were with me or with you. So part of that is because we are more worried about what others thought than what God wanted for us. For me, I was worried more about what I wanted to do for Him and how I wanted to do it for Him than I was what He wanted from me. I was doing things for God, but He was my third priority in doing them at best. So flip with me to 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 12. Now I'll say it again just so you can remember it. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 12. It says, "Are we commending ourselves to you again? No, we are giving you a reason to be proud of us, so you can answer those who brag about having a spectacular ministry rather than having a sincere heart." The second half of this verse described me perfectly. I was quick to talk about everything I was doing for God, but my heart wasn't sincere. My heart wasn't in the right place. I loved my youth group growing up. I loved what I was doing in life. I loved the people back home that were proud of me. And I honestly didn't love God more than anything else, which is obvious to me now because I know that I wasn't obeying Him. I was where I wanted to be, not where God wanted me to be. Does this describe you? Maybe you're busy doing a lot of things for God, things that impress you and others. Are you doing what He wants from you or what you want to do for Him? Are you walking by faith or are you doing what makes sense? Do you only do for Him what is comfortable for you? Showing up to church, going on youth group trips, talking about Him when you're safely around other Christians? Or are you stepping out into what He has actually asked you to do? So, where's your heart in relation to God? Is it fully His? Do you spend time with Him because you long to be in His presence more than anywhere else? God wants our hearts first. He wants us to love Him, to be thankful to Him, to be broken over our sin, while also being secure in His love and salvation. If what's going on inside isn't aligned with Him, nothing we do outwardly can please Him. If you flip to the book of Psalms, chapter 50, we'll be reading verses 7 through 15. And that's Psalms chapter 50, verses 7 through 15. O my people, listen as I speak. Hear my charges against you, O Israel. I am God, your God. I have no complaint about your sacrifices or the burnt offerings you constantly offer. But I do not need the bulls from your barns or the goats from your pens. For all the animals of the forest are mine, and I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know every bird on the mountains, and all the animals of the field are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for all the world is mine and everything in it. Do I eat the meat of bulls? Do I drink the blood of goats? Make thankfulness your sacrifice to God, and keep the vows you made to the Most High. Then call on me when you are in trouble, and I will rescue you, and you will give me glory. So Israel was doing the right outward things, which were visible to other people and other nations. They were making sacrifices. They were making burnt offerings constantly. They never missed a beat with this, but they were missing the point. God didn't require sacrifices because he needed them. That had to do with their relationship with him. He didn't really need anything from them, just as he doesn't really need anything from us. There is nothing we could give him that isn't already his. Well, except the one thing, we can give him ourselves fully. We have free will, and we can choose to surrender to him or not. He wants us to give him our gratitude, recognizing that everything we have is his. He wants us to give him our gratitude, understanding that we only have life, both physical and spiritual, because he has given it to us and he sustains it. And he wants us to give faithfulness as a sacrifice to him. We make vows to do things all the time, don't we? Maybe on one of the mission trips you told God you were going to do something for him. Tell someone about him, invite them to church, serve in some way, spend time in his presence every day. I don't know what it is, but maybe you made a vow to him. He wants us to keep our promises to him as one of our sacrifices. Not only does he want us to be thankful and faithful, but he also wants us to recognize our brokenness. He wants us to see our sin and grieve it. He wants us to see our sin, grieve it, and recognize that he is better and his way is better. He wants us to turn towards him. Psalms chapter 51 verses 16 through 17 say, "You do not desire a sacrifice, or I would offer one. You do not want a burnt offering. The sacrifice you desire is a broken spirit. You will not reject a broken and repentant heart, O God." So this doesn't mean that God didn't require sacrifices for sin in the Old Testament. He certainly did. But what was more important to him was a sacrifice, which is an outward action, or David truly having a broken spirit and a repentant heart. David could go and make a sacrifice because it was required by law without actually feeling repentant over what he had done. God wanted David's heart to be his first, and his sacrifices to happen as a natural result of his heart being God's. That's what God wants from you. Of all the sacrifices you can make to God, financial offerings, time commitments, using your gifts to serve in the church, the one that God wants the most is your heart to be fully his. He wants you to grieve your sin to the point that you turn to him away from the sin and sacrifice your will so that his will is your life. He wants you to be thankful and faithful to him. You know why? Because when we turn toward God, trust his will for our lives, and thankful to him, and keep our promises that we make to him, all the other sacrifices will fall in line. They'll happen as a natural outpouring of our heart being his. So as you go about your day-to-day activities, remember this phrase: I will sacrifice my heart to God and make it fully his. And I'll repeat that one more time. I will sacrifice my heart to God and make it fully his. Write it down if you need to, or do whatever you need to remember that phrase. But don't just remember it, do it. Give your life fully over to God. Seek his face. Rest in his presence. Be in his word. Listen for him. Be who God has created you to be, and do what God has created you to do. That's it for this week's Digital Short, and we'll see you again next week at our regular time, hopefully.